Hello everybody, my name is Jamal Malik, and in this video we're going to talk about setting sales and revenue targets. Now this video is most useful for technology companies, however frankly you can use it for just about any industry and any product that you're selling. The principles are pretty transferable. Now I want to start by actually talking about a few terms and concepts before we get too deep into this discussion. So the first set of terms that we're going to cover is target, budget, and then quota. Very simple, but we're going to be using a lot of it, so I thought it was important to kind of level set there. So a target is effectively what you assign a product or a solution area for an entire company. Okay, so it's an organizational revenue goal, the word target. You can then break a target down into a budget. A budget is then allocated out either geographically or a number of different means, but effectively, if you kind of add it up all together, it should equal up to the target. Now, that being said, a little caveat here, sometimes budgets, if you add them all together, can actually equal more than the target, but I'll cover that here a little bit later and why that's done. The next step down from a budget is what we refer to as a quota. And a quota is typically assigned to an individual seller. Okay, so a quick recap. We've got target, budget, and quota. I'll refer to those terms fairly extensively, kind of going forward. Now, the next area I want to just quickly touch on, kind of a philosophical conversation, but I think it's important to kind of point out. And that is the difference between a soft target and a hard target. Now, a soft target is something we typically see organizations, kind of drive towards, and if they hit it, they have like a stretch goal, and they're trying to, hit that second number. Our strong recommendation is to not use soft goals. Always, always, always have a hard target, and here's why. Okay, so first and foremost, when you have a hard target, there's only three outcomes that can occur when you have a hard target, and that is you either make the number, you don't, or you exceed it, which is great. Now, another reason why you want to use a hard target versus something that's maybe fluctuating or even on a sliding scale is because it makes business management so much easier. Okay, all the reporting that you use can obviously use just one number. The conversations you have with different business leaders, it's all aligned towards a specific number and a specific outcome that they're trying to drive. Now, another reason why it's really important to use just a hard target is because it helps you in a much more effective way understand the impact that things like marketing and additional investments that you make to help you drive and achieve your number a lot more understandable. I'll kind of also talk about that's on the ancillary of target setting, but not 100% related to it, is the fact that we highly recommend, whether you're a SI, a solution integrator, or an actual technology company offering a product, is that to actually have product and offerings around what you offer. Now, what we mean by that is, and this happens more for consulting companies and solution integrators, is that they typically don't create bundles or they don't scope their offerings. They typically kind of start off with a blank sheet of paper and customize like every implementation for every customer. Now, I'm not saying it's not a good approach or a approach to engaging with your customers. However, I'll be able to say it makes target setting and I'd even say deal velocity a whole lot faster when you have something scoped, a product that you can kind of talk about. Even if you adjust it, it makes the sales conversations go a whole lot faster. Okay, so now let's get into figuring out how to set targets. Now, whether you're doing it for an actual technology product or a solution or even a service, or you're talking about, as we mentioned earlier, you're a consulting company, you will help out with optimizing existing sales infrastructure or implementing new products or whatever that is. How do you figure out how much to grow year over year? Okay. Now, for the most part, if you look at the technology industry, and we've covered this in past videos, we've seen that the technology industry is growing at a pretty healthy 20, 25 to even 30% year over year as an industry. Now, frankly, if you kind of double click that and you look at what's actually happening in the market, it is wildly different. You have some companies that actually could be declining in revenue year over year, and you can have some companies that are growing at 300-400% year over year. What I'm going to talk about is what we feel is a healthy level of growth, and we'll also talk about like the ends of the spectrum, why perhaps not creating too aggressive of a target, how that can impact your business, and then what happens when you create too aggressive of a target. So for the most part, again, as we mentioned, most technology companies will create targets with growth rates of about 15%. And that's actually probably a pretty good and healthy growth rate, both in terms of showing that your company is growing at a steady rate year over year, and it's something that the business can sustain. Okay, it's not killing itself every single year trying to hit its goal. Now let's talk about some of the ends of the spectrum here. Now, granted, if you are pretty confident that your organization is able to grow at a pretty large multiple year over year, then hey, go for it. Okay, but here's what happens typically when you see too high of a growth year over year. So the first issue that occurs is that when you have too aggressive of a target, it also introduces a couple of problems. Number one, if something is growing way too fast, typically it's being done maybe without a whole lot of attention to detail, or potentially even through poor ethics. Now, I'm not saying this happens all the time, but if you see businesses that are growing 100% year over year, not only is that difficult to sustain, but typically you kind of have to look at it and make sure that there's nothing malicious potentially going on as well. Unfortunately, more often than not, data has shown that when you see high growth rates such as that, there's unfortunately something not nefarious but potentially malicious going on as well. And we can have a whole discussion around ethics and how that impacts growth rates in future videos, but suffice it to say, if you do look, you'll see lots of examples where that is the case. Additionally, moving away from the ethics discussion, typically when businesses grow that fast, you don't have processes that are built in an optimal or effective or efficient way. So, hey, whatever kind of gets the job done now. You're also probably spending a lot of money, either redundant processes or solutions. It's just not a very efficient way to kind of grow a business. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you don't have an aggressive target, let's say you're only growing at 2 or maybe 5% year over year. Now, if that's the market you're in, and that's what you've seen year over year, that's fine. However, again, kind of a rule of thumb in business is just like in nature, if it's not growing, it's dead. And so, having somewhat of a target that's hard to attain does help both in terms of long-term sustainability, but then also keeping the business competitive and also evolving over time, which is an important aspect that you have to think about when you're performing target setting exercises. Okay. Now, as we kind of talk about, of course, the approaches, let's also maybe kind of double click on when you create an overall target, how that kind of carries down to the products that you provide. So for the most part, once you create an overall target, you then want to go and create targets at the product or the service level that you're offering. Now, you can have one product that could have a higher growth rate and some that maybe not. And that's perfectly fine, because when you blend that all together, hopefully it aggregates up into the overall revenue goals for the company. And again, it all boils down to overall what you're trying to achieve, but then you can have parts of your business that could obviously be growing faster than others, and that's perfectly understandable and okay. Okay, so 2 more topics I want to kind of quickly touch on, and we'll kind of bring this to a close, and that is setting quarterly targets. Won't spend a ton of time on here, but I do want to kind of quickly point out that once you have your yearly target created, you then want to move to an exercise of creating quarterly targets. So you want to basically cut up your yearly revenue goal into quarters. Now, most organizations do not stagger the quarters equally. And what I mean by that is, you're not taking 25% of your goal and you're applying it to Q1, Q2, Q3. Usually what you see is a kind of a ramp for the end of the year where it's slowly growing with the largest target happening at the end of the year versus at the beginning. And that's obviously very understandable. And the theory around that is that as you begin your year, your fiscal year for sales, you're working on opportunities, you're trying to close them obviously within the quarter. Some will close, some will maybe slip to the next quarter. However, by the end of the year, you should be working on a good subset of opportunities that you're just focusing on closing. Hence, you have bigger targets at the end of the quarter versus at the beginning. Now look, that is absolutely not always the case. You have to obviously know your business and the seasonality of your business. You could work for an organization like FedEx or let's say H&R Block, who makes a majority of their revenue within a few months in a quarter, and that is what it is. It's a seasonality of the business, and maybe you want to move away from that heavy revenue hit at the beginning of the year, maybe kind of stagger it more evenly, and so you can create targets to either offset or counter some of the natural things you see within your own business in terms of when you're creating revenue. Okay. All right. Well, look, this is a lot I know of information we covered, but again, just want to take a second and kind of talk through what you should probably think about when you're setting targets, or revenue goals for your organization. Thank you.